Jim Middleton back reporting live. As the sun sets on the APEC summit in Beijing, the much anticipated G20 summit is nearing takeoff and the leaders are already starting to touch down in Brisbane. So what can we expect over the next few days with so much political horsepower in one room? And coming off the back of today's big climate deal between the US and China. Joining me now in Brisbane is Tom Switzer from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Tom, thanks very much for joining us. First to this big deal in Beijing, Barack Obama and Xi Jinping. Now, substantial or symbolic, do you think?
More symbolic, I think, Jim. To reach an ambitious agreement to decarbonise the US and China economies is one thing, but acting on it, if one is trying to be effective and not merely to feel virtuous, is a complicated process. The Chinese leaders have made it clear throughout the last 10 or so years that their priorities are to grow their economy, more recently 7 to 8% annual growth, and to lower poverty. And that requires substantially being on the back of carbon-based energy. Now, it is true that China's leaders have made a lot of investments in renewable energy. They even have some pilot cap-and-trade emission trading schemes in some provinces. But bear in mind, their net emissions are steadily escalating. The Chinese government is building a coal-fired power plant once every 8 to 10 days. And moreover, with the Republicans controlling both houses of Congress, it's highly unlikely that Washington will decarbonise the US economy anytime soon.
What about the analysis that this at least was something that these two leaders could agree on, given they disagree on so much else, the demonstrations in Hong Kong, East and South China Seas, for example, the new development bank that China is promoting, so that this was at least something they could agree on?
I think that's absolutely right. What we're witnessing in the last few years is a new era of Chinese assertiveness, military expansion, playing with fire with the Japanese in the East China Sea, the Filipinos and the Vietnamese in the South China Sea. And at the same time, the United States is committed to a pivot, or as they call it now, a rebalance of US diplomatic, economic and military might in East Asia. So there are these tensions, and there's a good case to be made that those tensions will escalate over the next decade. So this is a good news story to get out of this. But ultimately, it does come down to the Lima climate change negotiations next month, and of course the UN conference in Paris next year. That's ultimately what's going to determine whether the United Nations will reach a legally binding, enforceable and verifiable agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to replace the Kyoto Protocol, which has expired. That's still a big task, I think, Jim. The Chinese and the Americans say they're committed to these big, ambitious tasks, but as I said earlier, the process of decarbonising their economies, given all those challenges, is very hard.
I suppose it has to be said that at least in this occasion, unlike in Copenhagen, you have the world's biggest developing economy and the world's biggest economy on the same side at this stage. What about the optics of this ahead of the G20, where Tony Abbott was very eager to leave climate change off the agenda and out of the headlines?
Well, the Abbott government was forced to acknowledge that climate change should play a role in the communique that will be released presumably on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, or maybe Monday morning. There will be at least a paragraph on climate change, and presumably the agreement will be that the United Nations will continue to try to reach a legally binding and an enforceable and verifiable deal to replace Kyoto. Nothing much has really changed. But look, the fact of the matter is, this will be a talking point in the media, but I don't think in reality it changes the optics. Remember, we've been here before. Time and again, the Chinese have said that they wanted to slash tariffs on various industries and cut agricultural sectors. But in the lead up to the Doha round in 2008, they led an effort on the developing world's part, China, India, much of South America, South Africa, to scuttle the trade talks, and Doha has never really got off the ground. I suspect, given everything we know about the difficulty in reaching a legally binding agreement, we might have the same difficulties in reaching an international consensus on a post-Kyoto agreement.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your analysis. Tom Switzer,
Thanks so much, Jim.
From the US Studies Centre at Sydney University, reporting to us from Brisbane. And ahead